Only we could eat and you can't, so whatever. Anyway, so welcome to the Sukkah. Welcome to Chabad of Park Heights' first annual Women's Farbrengen Simchas Beis Rivka. And I'd like to introduce Rabbi Yossi Paltiel, who has the Mesiras Nefesh to come and leave Crown Heights and come all the way to Baltimore, which he found out was once called the Yerushalayim de America, so we're going to bring that back. And join us. He has a website that I understand everyone should check out. It's called Inside Chassidus.org.
Very good.
.org. And he teaches at Machon and at the Lubavitch Yeshiva, and he's going to teach us too. So here he is. Hold on.
Okay.
Here you go.
Okay. Hello, first of all, good Moed. I'm trying to see if I know anybody here. Oh, yes, how are you? Yes. You look familiar. Okay. Yes. I've seen you. You looked familiar. Yeah, okay. Oh, hello. Okay, very good. Okay, that's it?
And I get your newsletter from Inside
very good.
Chassidus,
Okay.
and I was in a class of yours at Machon.
A long time ago.
Oh,
Okay.
not that long ago. What? No, it
What,
wasn't
20
that
years
long.
ago? 15 years ago?
No, like 3 years ago.
Oh, 3 years ago is yesterday. Okay. Yes. Okay, good morning, everybody. This is a Farbrengen for Simchas Beis Rivka. There's something ironic about a Farbrengen for Simchas Beis Rivka. I had a Farbrengen last night and a Farbrengen the day before. What do you talk about by the Farbrengens? How you're not supposed to be Farbrengen, you're supposed to be dancing. Now the women have a good excuse to create an environment for the women to dance, which is not a bad idea actually. It's a little more complicated. But mitzvahs hayoim b'simcha, Sukkot, the season is to be b'simcha, to dance. It's an idea that the Rebbe started almost 30 years ago. This is, I guess, the 30th Sukkot in 1980, Tafshin Mem Aleph, which was a Shnas Hakel. The Rebbe spoke about it. I was a young boy at the time. I was, just old enough to think I was important, and it was one of the first innovations that Rebbe made in my generation. This idea of Simchas Beis Rivka. Rebbe turned around after Maidev and he started talking. He didn't get any introductions. Mrs. Lisbon did not introduce him. And he just started to talk, turned around and started talking. So people gathered and he talked about Sukkot and Simchas Beis Rivka. That it's a time for Simcha and for dancing and so forth. He spoke for about half an hour and it was very interesting. And I figured we danced a little. I don't think we danced that much initially. The following night after Maidev, we turned around and started talking again. So we got the idea that he meant business, that this wasn't just a hit and run, but this was going to be a steady push. And to say that I recall exactly how it evolved is simply not true. But it was, Simchas Beis Rivka was one of those ideas that sort of spontaneously combusted. Either the second night or the third night, but it didn't take a long time, that the Hasidim, by their own initiative, just marched out of 770 and marched in the street. And we didn't get permission from the police, we didn't get permission from anybody. First we danced on the sidewalks, then we danced on the streets. You remember. But it all happened by itself. The Rebbe spoke about Simcha and about dancing. Now, I don't know what the Rebbe was thinking. My suspicion is that anything we do, the Rebbe's dream is 10 times as large. So I can't imagine what the Rebbe was thinking. But he certainly didn't say, go out to Montgomery and Kingston, close the traffic, dance all night, and everyone should be exhausted for a week. He didn't say that. He spoke about dancing. And within 2 or 3 nights, Kingston Avenue was taken over. And the police decided it was in their best interest to close off Kingston Avenue because the alternative was Eastern Parkway, and that would have been a problem. So we danced, and within a day or two after that, The Rebbe got the idea that we got the idea. So he responded to the way Simchas Beis Hasheva developed. It happened very quickly. This dancing in the street. Think about it. For a whole week. Normal people, I mean, I guess it's a matter of opinion, right? Dance till 6 a.m. Anach nach anach. 7 nights in succession. Hashem helps Hoshana Rabbah. You have to never say Tillim, so there's an interruption. But it's an incredible concept. In the middle of the street, they just close off Kingston Avenue. There's no traffic. I mean, there's plenty of traffic. But that's it. A ganze Nacht tanzen. And it really came more from the Hasidim than it came from the Rebbe. And I think that's what's so beautiful about Simchas Beis Hasheva. You know, if the Rebbe would have said, made a campaign that we should all sit, I don't know, and study for 6 hours at night, I have a suspicion it would have been a little bit more difficult to get it going. When you talk to Lubavitch Chassidim about dancing, it's a good match. It works well. And that's what happened. And then the Rebbe started to talk about, he started to react to what had transpired. I'm just turning my phone off, okay? Don't feel insulted. And he said, you dance in the street until the street dances and the whole world is jumping up and down. He says, you see the policeman dances also. And this became the tone, this became the mood. And it was a very, very exciting experience when it started, and it's still exciting. It's the most incredible thing. You come to Crown Heights, okay, 9 o'clock at night it starts. I'm never there at 9 o'clock at night. No one from Crown Heights is there at 9 o'clock at night, except maybe people with little kids. And all kinds of Jews come from all different kinds of communities. The place is full. And but the Lubavitchers show up 1 o'clock in the morning, right on time for Shacharis. Come 3 o'clock in the morning, 4 o'clock in the morning, 5 o'clock in the morning. Hundreds of people, hundreds of people, perhaps thousands, 1,000, I'm going to say thousands, are just dancing and dancing and going around and around and around. And when the evenings start, I don't know how to say this gently, the people who want to be noticed dance. But as the night progresses, the people who want to be noticed have already been noticed and taken their leave. And the people who want to get lost emerge. And the dancing is like an intense fire. You know, when you make a teepee and a campfire, so it's gigantic, it's very large, it's very beautiful, and everyone is impressed with that one, outdoors person who knows how to do something other than sit in the classroom. And he builds this beautiful teepee with many, many logs and makes a big, beautiful fire. And the fire is climbing 40 feet into the sky, but eventually it all collapses. The fire is small, but incredibly hot. Incredibly hot and incredibly beautiful. That's what happens to Simchas Beis Hasheva every night. You come to Grand Heights, and if you stop and you think about it, it's really hard to believe that this is going on. This is 30 years. And like everything else that the Rebbe does, we have the zchus to be participants in it, we have the zchus to feel it, to be it, and of course to benefit from it. Today, Simchas Beis Hasheva is part of the Jewish culture. I mean, every community in New York makes Simchas Beis Hasheva. I don't think they have enough Meshuganas to account till 6 o'clock in the morning for 7 nights a week, so they make accommodations for that. But Baruch Hashem, Crown Heights has no shortage. That's what happens. It's the most amazing thing. And at a certain point, you actually discover, this is kind of difficult. It's okay for a night, it's okay for a couple of hours, but to keep doing this marathon of dancing, and at a certain point, I'm sorry?
Raise some money for it.
Raise some money for it. Well,
I mean, if it's a marathon, might as well raise some money.
Of course, you have to have sponsors. And what are we dancing for? We're dancing for what? A Mashiach's all coming. That's all. We don't need to raise money for that. We need to raise mitzvahs for that. Okay, money too. I guess money is a very important mitzvah. You start discovering that this is kind of hard. And then you start discovering that it's also kind of serious. In other words, when Simchas Beis Hasheva started, I had just turned 15. I was a little guy with a big attitude. And to me, to dance on the street all night was not a problem. I mean, first of all, because I could sleep all day. The first couple of years, my brother and I, we would dance till the sun came up. We'd find a minyan. We'd daven. I think that's what we did, depending on how tired we were. Then we would get in line for the Rebbe's lulav. after davening already. By 10 o'clock in the morning, we were in bed. We had to get up for mincha. That's it. The only responsibility we had. Unfortunately, I can't do that, So you realize that this whole idea of simcha, it is, as the Rambam calls it, avoida. Rambam calls simcha avoida gedola. Avoida gedola means avoida gedola, right? You know Hebrew. Avoida means work, labor. Avoida gedola means a great work, an important work. And the words avoida gedola connote two things. It's important, and it's not easy. At 15, at 16, at 17, for most people, simcha is not such a big deal. At a couple of times, 15 and 16, it becomes more difficult. Why? What do you mean, why? Because the reality, the enemy of simcha is life, right? Well, that's the wrong word. The challenge of simcha is life. Or the challenge of life is simcha. And the Rebbe gave us this idea, this chap, that we should dance until we can taste it. This is one of the easy things about simcha. If you're going to sit in shul and make believe you're davening, you're not going to end up davening. You're going to sit in yeshiva and make believe you're learning, you're not going to become a Talmid Chacham. But if you go to Simchas Beis Hashiva and make believe you're happy, it'll work. Another half an hour, another 20 minutes. Eventually you get lost. And that's really what the simcha is. You become part of everybody. You forget about yourself a little bit, and you experience simcha. Simcha is a Yiddish zach. Simcha is a deep thing. It's an incredible thing. And it's its own greatest reward. This is the emes. It's its own greatest reward. And of course, what matters very much is that the simcha should be nimshach al kol hashana kula, right? The worst thing that could happen is that you dance for a week, and that when the week is over, the regular depression, realism, reemerges. You want the simcha to persevere. And this is what any person who's past whatever age understands and appreciates in a very real way, that life is life, and Yiddishkeit is the life of Yiddish, is the life of life. But what life is and what Yiddishkeit says life is don't go naturally together. Mashiach will come, they'll go naturally together, so we'll have to figure out what to be frustrated about. But in the meantime, unfortunately, we don't have any problem understanding the challenge of the resolution, the reconciliation between life and Yiddishkeit. They're not on the same page, and we have to make them merge. We have to make them fuse. We have to make them coincide. We have to make them aligned to some degree, that the real life, our everyday life, and the will of Hashem should match. And one of the key ingredients is simcha. A Yid, there was a Polish Yid. I never met him. I heard about him. So this is what I heard. He was an Atvatska Talmud. He learned in the Lubavitch Yeshiva in Atvatska before the war. He survived the war never alone, all by himself, as most did. But I don't know what the reasons were. That's how he lived his whole life. He never got married, never had a family. He remained at Avak. He was alone his whole life. And he wasn't strictly a Lubavitcher. He would, he visited everybody visitable. And he had an interesting relationship with the Rebbe. Unusual, very human relationship with the Rebbe. He was very honest with the Rebbe, and the Rebbe was quite honest with him. So he once walked into the Rebbe's room, I don't know what the occasion was, and he said to the Rebbe, "Was macht der Lubavitcher Rebbe?" which translates into English, "How are you, Rebbe?" which is not exactly the way Lubavitchers talk to the Rebbe. "How are you? Was machst du?" So the Rebbe doesn't hesitate. Ich bin Talmid b'simcha. I'm Talmid b'simcha. That's an incredible thing to say. And I'll tell you a counter story. I turned off my watch, my clock. I don't have a watch. If someone could lend me a watch, it's in your best interest that I know the time. Believe me. You don't know so yet, but you'll find out. Thank you very much. There was a Yid who lived in Crown Heights, who has since passed away. His name was Mr. Steinmetz, Rabbi Steinmetz. He was more rabbi than most rabbis, but he was Mr. Steinmetz. He had no sons, so you don't know his name in Lubavitch. But I'll give you an idea who his grandchildren are. You'll appreciate who he was. Yankee Tauber is one of his grandsons. Shlomo Yaffe is one of his grandsons. And Betel Lazar is one of his grandsons. So you understand, this was no ordinary man. very interesting person, very much a maverick. There was nobody like him. He was a Talmud Chacham, but he wasn't a yeshivish person. He was very artistic, he was very gifted, very talented, and he was a businessman, he was a successful businessman. And he wrote poetry, Shirim. And he survived the Holocaust with his wife and all three of his daughters, which was a miracle of miracles in Budapest. And like many survivors, he felt that he should give something up, that something he should cease to do as his being a part of the Holocaust, the tragedy. So he stopped writing poetry. When he came to Lubavitch, which is a story unto itself, the Rebbe met him, the very early 1952, and the Rebbe somehow found out that he had been writing poetry. So he says to him, I understand that before the war you wrote poetry. He says, yeah, but I feel that I don't have the right to indulge in this kind of self-entertainment. I've ceased to write poetry because of the war. And the Rebbe said, would it be okay if he sees some of his earlier poems? He showed the Rebbe his poems. There's a story about that also. And the Rebbe tells him, you must continue writing. You must. He says to the Rebbe, how could I? You know, I have to lose something. And the Rebbe says, you don't understand. Writing the poetry is winning the war. It's not indulgent in self. You have to write and you have to publish. And he wrote and he published, and his poetry is very well recognized in Israel. All the frum schools, they use his poems. I'm sorry? Huh? You can hear me better. Got to raise the amp. Okay, I'll try to keep it closer to my mouth. So he wrote a number of poems about the Rebbe. In 1982, when the Rebbe turned 80 years old, he wrote a poem. And it's an incredible poem. I read it and I forgot it, of course. But there's one line in that poem that I want to share. The design, the model, the construct of the poem is contrasts. Like, for example, he has his head in the clouds, so his feet are planted firmly on the ground. He lives in the world of the Torah, so he has to have a very clear sense of the real world. Things like this. And one of the contrasts that he incorporated was this, that the Rebbe hears everybody's tzaras. Right? All of the problems in the world flow to his heart. Alkein mayon simchase lo yechaze, which means his fountain, his reservoir, his resource of joy is inexhaustible. So the Rebbe read the poem. I don't know what the circumstance was. This is 1982. The Rebbe read the poem and he came to this line and he said, Halavai. In other words, it's not so simple. Simcha, the Rebbe hears Nebuch, everybody's tzaddis. The Simcha is an incredible inyan. The Rambam calls it Avodah Gedolah because it's important and because it's difficult. So we have a week, right? Jews have had a week for thousands of years. Sukkot is man Simcha Seinu. What's Sukkot? You sit in the sukkah, you shake a lulav, and you go on trips. And the Lubavitcher, okay, you go miftzah lulav. Okay. So the Rebbe said, no, do it. It's man Simcha Seinu. Do it. How do you do it? You close off the street and you dance. Till when? Till the sun comes up. Until the buses have to go. From Flatbush to Williamsburg, a whole night. And when you watch it as an outsider or you hear about it, it seems like the most ridiculous thing in the world. When you join it and you become a part of it, it's incredibly uplifting. It's incredible. It's uplifting not just for the men. The women cannot dance because it's the street, but they're there, and it raises everybody up. It puts you in a special space. I mean, I don't know your schedules about coming to Brooklyn, but it's a good thing to come push up for one night and schedule nothing else. Show up late. That's my advice to you. Like midnight, and just stick around. It's a very, very warm and uplifting and meaningful feeling. That's what Simchas Beis Rivka provides. It's an incredible experience, and this is a very, very integral part of Yiddishkeit. This thing from Simcha. What I want to share in conjunction with this is this. I want to give you a little. Right, the rabbis introduced me as a teacher, which is a terrible thing to do. I stop when people start falling asleep. That's the way it works. I want to share a very simple but very, very important insight. The soul of joy, the soul of this simcha, is betachin in Hashem. Betachin, trust. The simcha is a symptom. When you live in the Yevish's world, so you can be besimcha. When you don't live in the Yevish's world, it's kind of difficult, it's kind of depressing. And that's really the neshama of it. The simcha of Sukkot, the simcha of Yiddishkeit, the simcha of Chassidus, and specifically the simcha of Beis Rivka of this time, its anchor, its root, is betachan on Hashem, belief in the Eibishter, and belief in the what's the word? The certitude of the presence of Hashem. He's not going away. You know, Hashem Tzuri. We read in the Siddur. Hashem is our rock. That means to say you can stand on Him, and He's not going to sink. He's not going to melt. You can hold on. He'll be there. That's touch betachan. And betachan is a challenge, and that's why Simcha is a challenge. Simcha is difficult because betachan is it's a day-to-day situation. Betachan is a very, very real part of our lives, and it's a constant test. We are constantly dealing with the need to strengthen betachan HaKadosh Baruch Hu. I have a friend who's a bit older than I am, who showed me an answer that he had gotten from the Rebbe. Today this person is Baruch Shema, a blessed Jew in many ways. At that time in his life he wasn't so blessed in many ways. And he's a Machon. I mean, even to this day he's naturally not Mr. Happy. He's a more melancholy type of a person. And he apparently had written a number of letters to the Rebbe which were quite depressing, right? To him they weren't depressing, to him they were his life. They were his reality, they were where he was at that time, didn't even have children, like one son. Should happen to no one. And he got an answer from the Rebbe and he showed it to me. I don't know why, but he showed it to me. The answer was Shlilas Hamorashcheda V'Yischaskus HaBetachan. That means to say, be less negative, less depressed, and have more betachan. This is his answer. Now, you know, if you could be an easy chos, you say, Rebbe, that's exactly what I wrote to you. Give me betachan, take away my Morashcheda. And the Rebbe tells him, no, that's your job. Shlilas HaMorashcheda. You have to lift, you have to redeem, you have to be bigger than those things, those realities that bring a Morashcheda, and have betachan in the Eibishter. And this is every day. Every person deals with this situation, the thing from betachan. So let's talk about it a little bit. Everybody here has a godly soul and an animal soul, right? It says it in Tanya, right? We're familiar, right? You heard of it? Okay. Nefesh Elokis and Nefesh Abamis. These two souls have distinct natures, distinct character, in a variety of different ways. It's not a Tanya class, but I'll just tell you very briefly how I distinguish between the two. The animal soul is needy, short-sighted, and worried. The godly soul needs nothing, is a visionary, and has trust. That's the short story. The Nefesh Abamis, the animal person, what we call the realist, right? Nobody who's a pessimist says, I'm pessimistic. There's no such thing. Optimists say they're optimistic, which means they're not sure they believe themselves. But pessimists are the pessimists. Pessimists say they're realists. You know, Murphy wrote 140 years ago, if something can go wrong, it will. And you know what? Unfortunately, he seems to be pretty right. Yeah. So the animal soul is the pessimist doesn't view himself as a negative person. The pessimist simply views himself as a realist. Reality is life. If it could be worse, it will be. The truth of the matter is that that's not true. It's really not true. But we believe it. We get caught up emotionally in that space. This is what the animal soul is. The animal soul wants to eat cake. If you tell the animal soul, if you wait an hour, I'll give you a salad, the animal soul says, listen, I want to eat my cake now, I don't want to eat an hour. And the cake tastes better. But the salad is healthy, so it tastes better, that's all. That's what the animal soul is about. And you tell the animal soul about deep, meaningful things. Listen, I'm not going to debate with you. I'm just not interested. It's boring to me. And the animal soul is perpetually worried. Always worried. What's he worried about? He's worried what's he going to do when he runs out of things to worry about. It's a very serious worry. My father told me he was in yeshiva, so he had a mashgiach. His name was Rabbi Liss. Rabbi Liss. I remember Rabbi Liss, but by the time I knew him, he was never not so healthy. But he was the mashgiach. He was I don't know what the right word is. He was in charge of the yeshiva, and he was a Hasidic Yid from the old country. And he had this gewaldige word. He had many gewaldige words. This is one of the things he said. He said that God curses the serpent. We learned it in the Chumash. Hashem curses the snake. What is the curse? That you're going to eat earth. So he asked a very simple question. That's a curse? Could you imagine wherever you go, you've got as much food as you could possibly want? How do you digest it? Okay, that's a detail. But the Eibusha says, what's the serpent worried about? What's the serpent's the curse? And the curse says the serpent walks around the earth, eating earth, wondering, what am I going to do when I finish eating up the whole planet? This is the Nefesh Bahamis. And the Yetzirah, Nefesh Lakis, has trust in Hashem. Now, trust doesn't mean that the bills are automatically paid. You know, in modern Hebrew, they use the word bitachon not to connote trust, but to connote security. That's how they use the word. And you think about it. I trust you means that you give me security, right? Now, if I trust you, let's not get into that, yeah? But when you say to the Eibishter, I trust you, that means that the Eibishter provides us with a certain kind of security. Now, the bills are still coming in the mail. We still have to write the checks. We have to cover them. We still have to raise our own children. We have to look after the many different things that divide us and spread us around and take away from us being allowed to completely focus on ourselves and our own connection to Hashem and so forth. And nevertheless, the neshama trusts Hashem. It trusts Hashem because the truth of the matter is, the real truth of the matter is that Lashem Aratum Loya. That means God's in charge. The Eibush does the balabas. You know the joke. Listen, there's no men around, so I can tell you this joke, right? About this wife who says, my husband and I have a great arrangement. He makes all the big decisions, I make the little ones. He decides who's going to speak at the General Assembly of the United Nations, and I decide what we're having for dinner, or where the kids are going to school. The Eibush does not only involved in who's going to speak at the General Assembly of the United Nations. The Eibush is involved in our kitchen. The Eibush is involved with our children, with our familiar life. In the smallest minutia of our lives, Hashem is involved. In America, they say, that's what it says in the Reader's Digest, if you believe them. Yeah, most people believe in God. Most people, Mahavdul, Goyim, and Yidden, believe in God. But that doesn't mean that most people are religious. The percentage of people who believe in God is far higher than the percentage of people who are religious. The difference is simple. To believe in God means that God created the world. That's what it means. To be religious, by the way, it means to keep the mitzvahs, but it also means something very, very meaningful, very deep. And that is, a frum person, a religious person, believes not only God created the world, but that God is involved in the world. Right now, right here, in my life, the Eibush is involved. That's a believer. Believing in Hashem doesn't mean God exists and He's worried about the General Assembly of the United Nations. Believing in Hashem means God exists and He's concerned with me. And when I do a mitzvah, I get nachas. And when I miss an opportunity to do a mitzvah, when I get angry, when I allow myself to be defeated by the realities of my life that are very real and are very defeating, the Eibush is sad. I don't think the Eibush gets angry. Even though it says in the Torah the Eibush gets angry, Chassidus, the Eibush doesn't get angry. Just trust me, Eibush doesn't get angry. When we fail, he's not bregas. The Eibush can be angry. If your 2-year-old did something wrong, we get angry at the kid. I guess we do get angry, but We're wrong for getting angry. But the Eibush doesn't run out of steam, you understand? He doesn't need to sleep and he didn't miss his coffee in the morning. He has Rachmanis. He feels bad. Our failure brings out in the Eibush the feeling of Rachman. Why? Because he wants us to succeed. He wants us to succeed with this test of B'tachon, this test of Simcha. And it's hard. So being a frum person really means, I guess in the classical form, believing in Hashgacha Pratis. It's a nish, not as a da nebishter, not as the balabos. Not only does God exist, He's the master of the world. We grew up in 770. I grew up in 770. I guess I should say I'm very fortunate, and I am incredibly fortunate. I won't give you the depressing side of that, but that's another discussion. There's a cloud to every silver lining. Don't worry about it. I'm sorry. Don't worry. That's so funny. That's why you're missing them. I'm sorry. I don't know. Okay, you gotta chain me up here to this mic. Can we turn up the mic? It's as high as it goes.
Can you stand?
I guess that would work. Yeah.
That would help.
Standing up. Yeah. Okay. I just sat in the car for 4 hours. I was getting tired of sitting. Okay. Being a frum, as I was saying to you, I grew up in 770. And if you ever were at a Fabrengen, and you could see it in the films. I'm sorry? It's not on? Okay. It's not my kind of mic. Okay.
Murphy's mic.
If you watch even a Fabrengen on a film, or if you've been to Fabrengen, you've had that incredible experience. One of the things that you discover about the Rebbe is the Rebbe had a very unusual way of speaking. He spoke very, very slowly and very, very deliberately. And the Rebbe didn't speak words. He roared them. He didn't shout, but there was so much neshama, there was so much person, there was so much Rebbe in every word. He was branding the words into your heart. This is my personal experience, and I know I'm not unique. When you heard the Rebbe say words, somehow you didn't forget them. It wasn't just what he said, but how he said it. The Rebbe said the words with so much heart, so much fire, so much neshama, that the words went from his neshama and they went into your neshama. I'll digress and tell you a story. This is a very beautiful story. There was a very, very famous Hasidic Rebbe, whose name was Reb Michal of Zlotchever. Reb Michal of Zlotchever. Reb Michal of Zlotchever. He was the Talmud of the Baal Shem Tov. His father was an incredibly holy man, a mamish extraordinarily holy man. His name was Rabbi Yitzchak Drabitcher. If you don't know where Drabitch is, don't worry. Neither do I. And they lived in Brod. City of Brod. Brod was very famous in Eastern Europe at that time. Brod was a large city with many, many, many Yidden and many, many shuls. But Brod was famous because it had what was called the Broder Klois. The Klois is I guess what we would call today the Shtibel. The Broder Klois was no Shtibel. The Broder Klois had 300 Goinim, 300 great scholars, married men, some of them were older, who sat and learned Kol Yomei Al Torah V'Avodah. They did nothing except study Torah. And they were incredible Goinim, great, great minds. And there was an enormous amount of Torah in Brod. And the head of this Klois was a Yid by the name of Reb Chaim of Tzanz. This is not the Divrei Chaim, not the Tzanz Rebbe, it's much before. Reb Chaim of Tzanz. He was not a supporter of the Baal Shem Tov, and that's putting it mildly. Reb Michal of Zlotchever was 7 years old. He was a little boy. But he was a prodigy. The kid was brilliant. Extraordinary mind. As a little boy, he mastered the Shas by heart. I don't mean 12, 6, 7 years old. When kids are learning how to read. And he sat in his house by himself and studied. Could barely hold the books. And when he needed any trouble, he would just consult his father, and his father would help him. One day, his father meets Reb Chaim of Tzanz, the head of the Klois, and says to him, I am under the impression that you have a son, A'ilu. You have a son who's a genius, a prodigy. Why don't you send him to the Klois? He says, I never thought of it. I'll consult. I'll talk to him about it. So he comes home and he goes to his little boy and says, was gehst du nicht in Klois? Why don't you go to the Kleid? You'll have company and sit by yourself. And can you imagine a kid who's sitting on a chair and his feet can't reach the floor and he's talking to the greatest goyim of the generation. Shava b'shava, man to man, equal. So he said, you want me to go to the Kleid? I'll go to the Kleid. So he went to the Kleid. He stayed a week. At the end of the week, he says to his father, Tate, ich geishe nicht in Kleid. I'm not going anymore. So his father says to him, why not? And he uses these words. Der gefällt nicht sein Teure. You feel like Reb Chaim of Tzanz is not sufficiently scholarly, he's not a big enough rabbi for you, his go'oiness is not adequate, you're too smart for him. He says, no. He says, Tate, sein Teure is wie dein Teure. He's as great a scholar as you are. Oh, but as redt, zech nicht, as gehen fire for sein Meul. He says, but when he speaks, I don't see fire coming from his mouth. Now, what do you think? He says, when his father taught him, he would see fire. The Yitzchak Dorbitcher was not a dragon, you understand? It's a Pnimi. When his father spoke to him, Divrei Torah, even Lomdus, he felt Kedush Torah, he felt oil, he felt the light, the holiness of the Torah. Here's a great, great Gaon, incredible mind, but that fire is not there. He says, he doesn't want. When the Rebbe spoke, every word was fire. And it branded itself into our hearts, into our souls. And the Rebbe also had a tendency to repeat certain phrases over and over and over and over again. So many times that you heard them by mistake and they stay with you forever. And one of those phrases is this. Boire oilamu manhigoi. Right? You've been to 770? The Rebbe would say this over and over again. In every Fabrengen, he would say it 20 or 30 times. Boire oilamu manhigoi. That means the creator of the world. Manhigoi means the master of the world, the governor of the world. Believing in Hashem does not end with saying, yeah, God created the world, we didn't come into being spontaneously, and we happened by mistake over eons. The Rebbe created us. But the Rebbe is Manig Ha'olam, he's the master of the world. And not just the big important stuff. The Rebbe is the master of our little lives. And that is the basis for B'tochen. What's B'tochen? Security. Why are we secure? I got bills to pay. Because I have trust in HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Easy? Gring? Ganz nicht. But this is basic Yiddishkeit. And you know what else? It's good therapy. It works. The alternative doesn't pay the bills either, by the way. No depression has ever solved any problems. And see, so this is what's happening in Chag HaSukkos. This is this man, Simchasenu. And if we have to act b'simcha to create genuineness of simcha, maybe a solution. In other words, whether simcha is the cause, or simcha is the effect, is I suppose a matter of us as individuals, and perhaps there's different levels in all of these things. But the bottom line is the simcha that we afford ourselves. When a person manages to forget about himself and to be in a space of simcha, it's a positive space to be because you're in the Eibishter space. It doesn't solve the problems, but it changes them. It changes the reality of our lives completely. Even though all that's changed is a perception or an attitude. And this is Man Simchas saying, this is what you get together in Sukkot. We have these Fabrengens, we dance, I guess 50 people can only generate so much Simcha. You come to Crown Heights, you get 5,000 people. It's a little easier. But you generate a real Simcha, which is rooted in a real B'tochen. And the most important thing is to be Mamshechet HaKol HaShana Kula, that the B'tochen should continue. It shouldn't stay just Sukkos. We should carry the Simcha through the whole year. And then Siva Sukkos will have served an incredibly real and incredibly useful and an incredibly practical purpose in our real lives. Because it's a good thing. It's a very, very good thing. Now, what am I going to do now? Tell you some stories. Yeah. I'll tell you some stories. Tell the Chamaisa. And after I tell you a story, I'll tell you another story. And after that, we'll see.
When do we get to dance?
When I leave. Tell me when you want me to go. I'm happy to leave. It's not a problem.
Watch the time, the men are coming.
Pardon?
I said, watch your time, your men are coming.
The men are coming, yeah. We got to get out of here before the men get here, yeah. Okay.
Yeah, you're funny. Get an hour there.
I read this in one of those handouts that they give out. In Brooklyn, they do advertising. But you got to make the advertising kosher, so you write some holy thing on top, like Torah Times. The whole book is advertising. What makes the Torah Times? You have a Vateda someplace hidden in the back. So if you look hard enough, you'll find some religion in these advertisements. So I found a story in there, which is a very interesting story. There was a very, very great Hasidic Rebbe. Now, if you were in Lubavitch, you would never know anything existed besides for Lubavitch. I know, I'm also in Lubavitch. But I happen to know this little piece of information. He was called the Ateres Tzvi, the Ziditova Rebbe, the Hershel Ziditova. He was a very famous Rebbe who lived a long time ago, I think in times of the Mittler Rebbe, and he was an incredible makubal. He wrote some very great Sfarim in Kabbalah. In the Hasidic world, Ziditova is very famous. And he did not have any children, I think, or any sons. And his nephews, his brother's children, were all his Hasidim, and then they all became Rebbes. The oldest of his nephews, who in effect succeeded him, was the Rav of Rosler. I think his first name was Yitzchak Isaac, but I could be wrong, and I would hate to be embarrassed and showed up, so whatever his name was. Here's the story. Rebbe Hershel Ziditova, this Ziditova Rebbe, had a grandson or granddaughter who was very ill, very sick. And they went to the Zayda, who was a big tzaddik, and about Baruch HaKodesh. I can tell you stories about this person. I know one story about him, actually, which is a mind-blowing story. Okay, I'll tell you the story. It's worth it. Okay. After this. Pardon? And he came. You try doing this for an hour. Okay. And that's fine. Thank you very much. That's a little too close. Yeah. And he came. They came to the Zay. They tell him, listen, your grandson is mamish near death. This was a man who was about Moifas Gol, and he doesn't respond. They visit him, periodically, and he has no reaction. And the whole mood in the house is terrible. It's so depressed. This kid is dying, and the machtach nicht wissendig. The Zayda doesn't notice. Now he had a custom, that tzvi, that during a certain period of the day or night, he would be alone, and you were not allowed to disturb him. This was off limits. And during this time, the child reached a condition of gesisa. Gesisa means it's a status in halacha, in Jewish law, near death, mamish near death. So they decided that in desperation they're going to interrupt him. Well, who's going to go into him? Who's got the chutzpah, got the nerve to interrupt this Rebbe? And everybody knows you're not allowed to go into him at this time. So they took his nephew, who was a young boy, who would later become a very great Chassidish Rebbe, the Roslerov, and said to him, go into the fetter, go into your uncle, and tell him that your granddaughter or son, whoever it was, is about to die, and it's time for you to notice. So this young boy was not a fool, and he's walking towards his uncle's study. He's going to interrupt him. What am I going to tell him? The Ateres Tzvi understands what the story is. So he knocks on the door, and the Ateres Tzvi opens up the door, and he says, Uncle, I came to give you good news, that your grandchild is feeling better. And the whole mood in the house is different, because the situation is looking brighter. When he tells this to his uncle, his face brightens. Says, "Oh, thank you for the good news." And he goes over to a shelf. He pulls down a jar, takes out some kind of a spice, and says, "Here, take this. Have them boil it in water and give it to the child, and the child will be fine." And that's what happens. On Nes Golim and Hashman, the child recovers completely supernaturally. Anyway, eventually they made a celebration, I'm sure, a simcha of Haidah, thanking Hashem for the great miracle. And everyone was curious. The first curiosity was, what did the Roslerov say to his uncle to get his attention? So he told him what he did. So when they had the Sudas Haidah, and of course the Ateres Tzvi was present, they said to him, Rebbe, could you explain Yahan Haga? He says, I'm in a house full of depressed people. Everybody is so down, so defeated, so forlorn. I'm helpless. Even we who are not so sensitive, if you're amongst people who are depressed, you feel physically exhausted. Forget about psychologically. You feel physically tired when you're around people whose disposition, whose mahus, whose maimed umatzav, whose emotional, psychological condition is heavy. It's like physical weight. Now think about a tzaddik who's tuned into Ruach HaKodesh, yeah? A Ruach HaKodesh is not angels with 6 wings. Ruach HaKodesh is the neshama. Ruach HaKodesh is the light of the neshama. There is no greater enemy to Ruach HaKodesh than sadness. The Gemara says, this is something which the Baal Shem Tov used to repeat all the time. Baal Shem Tov would say it over and over again. You want to divorce God? Go into a bad mood. That's it. You want to push Hashem out? Be down. You want to invite the Meibishten in? Free yourself from that heaviness. The reality doesn't change, but everything changes completely. So when this nephew of his walks into him, and instead of giving him the rhetoric that he's been hearing for weeks, which completely disarmed him, here's a tzaddik, who's taka b'al moifis, who has special powers, who has Ruach HaKodesh, and his environment has imprisoned him. What's around him has completely frozen his own ability to be in touch with Ayin Ruchnius, with something a little bit higher. He cannot help his grandson because the people around him are not allowing him to. It's an interesting story. So when his nephew walks in and tells him something bright, it didn't matter that it wasn't true. That wasn't the point. The point is, suddenly he was able to be above that heaviness, and the Eibusha did give him a special koiches, and he was able to use them and to affect the miracle that he affected. But this is a maise, a sheina maise, about Simcha. And now, none of us are being Mechayim Mesim, you understand? But all of us can relate to this. You know what? You could say we've been Mechayim Mesim. Mechayim our own Mesis, our own Verschlaffenkeit, with a little help, b'tachan the Eibishter. And this is what's happening in Chag HaSukkos. This is what happens every day. But this is the season. Zman Simchaseinu means we should strengthen our b'tachan the Eibishter and draw from that b'tachan an ability to be positive, and uplifted. No one situation changes, but everything changes, and it works both ways. The betachan creates the simcha. I guess that's the way it's supposed to be, but the simcha creates the betachan also, and we'll take it any way we can get it. Now, I want to tell you this story, totally irrelevant. What's on Moed Dikamaisa? That is tzvi. The following story has no relevance to Sukkot. It's a ma'isa for tzaddikim. A mamish ma'isa pilip loy. An unbelievable story. I heard it from a yid whose father heard it from the Bala Maisa when he was a little boy. It's a truth. I have it from a good source. Very interesting story. I'm turning the tape over. That's my cue to stop, right? No. That's where they have auto reverse. Okay. In Galicia, in Hungary, there was a Rav who was called the Marsham. If you haven't heard of the Marsham, don't worry. A lot of rabbis haven't heard of the Machon. The Brezhane Rav, the Rav of Brezhan, his grandchildren in Yerushalayim, you have the Brezhane, his grandchildren are famous Magidim. I forgot the name. His Einiklach, a very choshev Bali Musa. The Brezhane Rav lived in Galicia, and he was known as a Mekel. That means to say, whenever there were questions in halacha, he was always the rabbi you went to get the heter. You know, if you wanted to get out of trouble, you went to the Brezhane Rav. And the Divrei Chaim, the Tzanzer Rebbe, was a very big machmir. His name was also Reb Chaim of Tzanz, Reb Chaim Halberstam. And they were always at odds. And the Brezhane Rav, the Divrei Chaim, the Tzanzer Rebbe, was the king of Hungary, king of Galicia. And here was this younger man, Shikar Rav, Sachakel, who wasn't a Rebbe, who was constantly finding kulas. And the Divrei Chaim let him know that he wasn't happy about it in more than a whisper. But he did his thing. Now, why was he such a makel? Why was he always finding leniency? So here's the story. It's a beautiful story. I think when he was 18, certainly when he was very young, but I think he was as young as 18, he was an Elo, he was a prodigy, brilliant young man, and he became terminally ill, very, very sick, very sick. And the way the story was told to me, he was so sick, Machon getzenden lecht. They were lighting candles already, you understand? They were accompanying his neshama. And he has a vision. He has a vision. And in his vision, he sees himself, he's delirious, you understand? He's completely not conscious, and he's seeing something. And in his vision, he sees himself being carried to the Beis Shalmaila, to the heavenly court. Comes to the Beis Shalmaila, you know, it's like a regular courtroom, there's a whole bunch of people sitting over there, and you take turns. They call you one by one, and there's a judge, there's a tribunal, And they sit and they hear everybody's case and they make determinations. When his turn comes, two malachim bring him up to the bench, and the judges look at his file, and they say, this fellow was a big Talmud Chacham, was a big Eloi, was a great scholar, he studied Torah day and night, but he learned Torah Shalei Lishma. The Torah that he studied was not pure, it wasn't for the sake of the Torah, he had ulterior motivations. So the Beis Rivka hears this whole presentation and announces he's guilty, he's charged, take him away. In other words, he's going to go to the end of it. His life is over. They carry his neshama out of the Beis Rivka, and he's being taken, away. And he's a distance from the Beis Rivka. This is all happening in his vision. And he hears a voice, wait, bring him back. Okay? So this voice says, bring him back, so he's being schlepped back to the Beis Rivka. He comes back into the courtroom, and he hears a voice. And this voice says, this happened 180 years ago. In this miserable, dark time, you are going to hold a Jew liable because his Torah was not pure, not perfect. Unfair. You got to give him a reprieve. You have to cut him some slack. And whoever this voice was stood his ground, and the Beis Rivka changes his psak. He can live. So he says to the angels that are holding him, who's that guy? Who's my friend? He says, hey, it's Eichenstein. His name is Eichenstein. Can I see him? Sure. They pick him up over a curtain, a screen, and he sees a man, Eichenstein. And he pops up. He's back. He recovered. Mamash hanes golim in Hashemayim. Now, Eichenstein, he knows who Eichenstein is. This is Tzvi. He's a physical man who lived at that time. His relatives were Chassidim. He was not Chassid. He said, I think I should go visit Eichenstein. I owe him a visit. So he travels to Zidichoy. He comes to Zidichoy Rebbe, and he gets him. There's a huge line of people, and someone negotiates for him that I'm sorry, he's too sick to stand in line. So he goes straight into the Rebbe. He walks into the room and receives the Rebbe. He takes one look at him and he faints. So that Tzvi said, "Amezeit ayitz in zweiten Mul darf machalischen." You see a Jew for the second time, you have to faint. Anyway, when he revived him, he said, "Listen here." He said, "Ich hab mit dir mekel gewen." He tells him, "I was lenient with you." He said, "Us Jews in Galicia are very poor. You should be lenient with us." That's the story. He said to him, "I was lenient with you. You should be lenient." So therefore, this is a shayna mais. Anyway. Thank you very much. I don't want to just talk for the sake of keeping on talking. Let's finish. We have what's called Chassidische Verbringens. Chassidim have Chassidische Verbringens. And I discussed it with my wife this morning. It's a topic that comes up, I'm sure, in many homes, many times. What's the point of a Chassidische Verbringen? Now, the women do it a few times a month, right? The Bacham do it a few times a week. And the guys do it as often as they could. What's a Chassidische Verbringen? A lot of people say it's a very, very, very efficient way at taking entirely useful time and expending it in a totally useless way. What's a Verbringen? What changes? You didn't learn anything. You don't even know halachas. You eat food. I mean, it's very, very good for the people who teach us how to diet. But that's about it. And the dentists make a living on Verbringens. And the Rebbe wants Verbringens. Lots of them. It's interesting. The Rebbe is a very serious man. By him, every minute is measured. Everybody knows this. And he hates wasting time. He wouldn't waste a moment of his time. I heard once that the previous Rebbe was saying Kaddish for his mother. And Reb Shmuel Levitin, who was the mashpia and the yeshiva, was in charge of the minyan. And I think the minyan was scheduled for 9 o'clock in the morning. And the boys came upstairs, they put on their tefillin, the Rebbe was going to say Kaddish. And Reb Shmuel was supposed to be the chazan, and it was 9:02, 2 minutes after 9. And Reb Shmuel was taking his time. So the Rebbe calls him over and tells him something, and he gets very agitated, very nervous. And he runs to the Yom and he starts to daven. So later on they asked him, "What did the Rebbe tell you that you got so upset?" The Rebbe picked up his watch, and said, "Was gambeste bei mir 2 Minuten? Why are you stealing from me 2 minutes?" Minutes, the Rebbe's minutes are very precious, and everybody's minutes are very precious. He would very much like that we should guard our time and appreciate it, and not just absolutely waste it like it's, like it's money. There's more where that came from. So nishtazai, time is the most, it's the most priceless commodity. You can't measure it, you cannot multiply it, you cannot divide it, and you certainly can't create more of it. And yet we have fabrengens. Fabrengens lift us up, and if they don't lift us up, they're not fabrengens. And that's very, very real. It's not nothing. You sit together, you have fabrengens, and when there's no guys around, you sing a niggin, you create a little bit of a good energy, a good mood, and every person raises up another person. One of the things that the Gemara tells us, I think about Salat. I have friends, and my friends have friends too. The people who are my friends, I am their friend. And when a friend comes and confides in you, tells you something, and you give him a punch in the arm, proverbially, of course, you kick him in the pants, and you say to yourself, who do I think I am to tell this person that he should have betachan deibishter? If I would be in that position, would I have betachan deibishter? And the answer is maybe not. But I would want him to do for me what I am doing for him. The Gemara says, the Talmud says, Ein adam chovash atzmei beis hasurim. A person cannot redeem himself from his own prison, but we can redeem one another. It's the way it is. This is a community, right? So I'm sure this has happened 1,000 times. Someone's going through something, and everybody else sees exactly what they need to do, and this person is spinning their wheels. They're just going nowhere. And why don't they understand that all they need to do is this? And the answer is because they're stuck. They're stuck. People get stuck. And when people get stuck, people help one another out. And just as today, so-and-so is helping out the other person, tomorrow the roles could be reversed. That's the way it's supposed to be. And that's what Fabrengens achieve. Fabrengens create a sense of community and a sense of upness. You go to Fabrengen to be depressed, you can stay home, you can do that alone, you don't need company. Misery likes company, but it doesn't need it, you understand? Joy must have company, it can't exist in a vacuum. It's just the way it is. So we have Fabrengens. These Fabrengens raise each other up, right? So I'm here in Baltimore, tomorrow I'll be back in Brooklyn. I hope tonight, yeah. Okay, my daughters are expected to be woken up and to be taking Simchas Beis Rivka, so we can dance till 6 in the morning. The later we start, the later we finish. Okay. But this is the point. We got together, and the point of this is not to get a lesson on betachan. You can go home and repeat it to your kids. They say a darshan, a public speaker, never does tshuva. Because if any hears a good idea, I'm going to use that in my next speech. So this is not about having material. Hopefully a little bit of warmth, a little bit of positiveness, a little bit of joy, a little bit of betachan deibishter was generated over here, and we should take it home, and we should appreciate that it's real. We're from a Yid, we believe that this is emes. Eibush is involved in our lives. And so the Eibush to machen by jeden einem gring auf den Herzen. It should be easy in everybody's heart. And it should have a year of incredible blessings and incredible success and incredible nachas and incredible alle gute Sachen. In Crown Heights they're discussing what's Tov Shin Ayin. And there's different opinions, but there's one position that nobody is questioning. Tehei Shnas Ashiras. Wealth. Not geld. Not the ruchnisdike geld, gashmisdike geld. Wealth, money, a lot of money. So they should mention a good year with hatzlacha dike year, and we should meet b'sevas machas and take it from Yad Mamish. Mashiach will come, and it'll be b'simcha, and then we'll worry about the fact that we don't have anything to worry about, and it's a big problem. Okay, a guten mayid in Kol Tov. Yes.